It has been a very long time since I've seen the excitement, the buzz, the enthusiasm that I've seen recently for this 2024 flowing hair silver dollar. And I thought it warranted maybe a little bit of a deeper dive. There's a lot of folks out there who have been fed misinformation or who might not understand the importance or the significance of this piece. And I know there's lots of guys out there who have made videos on YouTubes of unboxing, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's a fun thing to see, right? There's some serious excitement for these pieces. But I thought it warranted a little bit of a deeper dive, so that's what we're going to do here today. We're going to take a deeper dive into the 2024 flowing hair, and then we will do a live unboxing immediately following the premiere of this video. If you are new to the channel, my name is Dub C. I want to thank you for being with me here today. If you're one of my returning subscribers, thank you guys as always for being with me. This is going to be a fun one. Lots of cool things to look at, lots of fun things to talk about, and then we're going to top it off with that live unboxing. How can you beat that? If you are new to the channel and you haven't yet subscribed, I'd like to encourage you to go ahead and click on that subscription button down below. It doesn't cost anything to subscribe to a channel. It's just a way to show support for it. And I'd love to have you be part of this community as well. And if you're new to the channel, I like to begin my videos with a simple disclaimer. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer you any kind of financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experience having bought and sold precious metals and rare coins for the last 30 or 40 years. And then I like to jump into a couple of definitions. I know we're going to get to the fun stuff, believe me. The definition that I wanted to use here is the idea of a privy mark, because I know that this is a little bit confusing to some folks, and it's really kind of a cool thing. And there are a lot of people who are been kind of naysaying what the mint has done here. But believe me, the U.S. has a pretty long history of privy marks. We've certainly used them a lot recently. And we're going to talk about privy marks. What is a privy mark? A small mark or differentiation in the design of a coin for the purpose of identifying the mint, the moneyer, the coiner, the mint master, or some other aspect of the coin's origin, and or to reduce the possibility of counterfeiting. So it's not entirely unlike a mint mark. A mint mark generally designates the city in which a coin was struck. And the United States has mints in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco. We also have a mint in West Point. So the Philadelphia pieces often, but not always, have a small P next to the date. The Denver piece is a D, the San Francisco an S, and the West Point pieces have a W. But we've had mints all over the country in the past. Some of them have been decommissioned, and we'll talk about a couple of those here in a minute. We had mints in Dahlonega, Georgia. We had mint in Charlotte, North Carolina. We had mint in New Orleans, Louisiana. We had a mint in Carson City, Nevada. And all of these mints, those last ones, don't exist anymore, but we can pay homage to those pieces through a privy mark, and we've got examples here. So let me give you a little bit of history of the idea of a privy mark. The United States government in the 1850s was suffering under monetary policy, global monetary policy, the amount of gold flowing into the economy because of the gold rush and so forth. So we had been making silver coins of a specific weight and purity for about 50 years. And all of a sudden we realized that we needed to reduce the amount of silver in our silver coins to keep those pieces from being shipped overseas as soon as they were minted. Because in certain circumstances, the face value of these pieces was less than the amount of silver contained within them. Remember, it's all about the weight, right? When it comes to silver, especially silver coins before the modern era, that's really what it was about. They weren't really seen as coins. They were seen as silver bullion in a lot of people's minds. We'll talk about some of those examples too. I got some really cool examples here that my brothers in arms who are metal detectors, hopefully I can make you a little bit jealous here. These two dimes and one other seated dime came out of the same square yard area about 20 years ago. And this is an 1853 seated dime. You can see that, but you see the arrows next to the date there and there. That is an indication that this dime, there we go, was of the lesser weight. The dimes had been 2.67 grams of silver, 90% silver. And then in this period of time, we dropped them down to 2.49. So the opportunity to recall these at some point in the future, the mint wanted to have these easy to recognize with those arrows. And although we didn't call them privy marks at that period of time, This is an example of exactly what a privy mark could be, right? By definition, this was a way to convey information about a coin. And I've got this other example, again, from that same coin spill that I detected, and this is in 1875. You can see that those arrows are now gone from either side of the date. At this point, we had increased the value of the amount of silver contained with these pieces back up again. So the coins that you see with these arrows, I believe that there's quarters and halves also of the same seeded series, sometimes can be found with those arrows. Those arrows could easily be seen as a privy mark. So a way of conveying information in a picture rather than words. And also keep in mind that the literacy rate of folks, going back 100, 150 years ago was not what it is today. So this was a great way of conveying information in a picture rather than words that people would be understand a little bit easier to understand. I've got some examples of some French pieces. The French were really good at privy marks. This is an example of a Napoleonic 5 francs. Talked about this one recently too. I'm sure some of you folks recognize it. But you can see this is in 1813, and that right there is actually two clasped hands. What does that mean? This piece was made by a gentleman named Marshal Parent of Limoges. That's where one of the mints in France was located, and he was the mint master of the Limoges Mint. This is a piece a little bit later. This is a Charles X piece of 1829, and you can see this mark here. It's a trident, right? You see those three prongs going down next to the date. That represents Edmond Morel of La Rochelle. So La Rochelle was another mint location, and that just indicates that he was the gentleman who was responsible for this piece, its purity, its weights, all that kind of stuff. And then finally, I've got this last piece by Louis Philippe slightly later. This is in 1854, I believe, 1834? 1834. This mark here, it's a little bit hard to see because it's so small and it's a little bit grungy, but that's like a palm tree. And that indicates Jacques-Henri Ricard of Marseille. He was the mint master at the Marseille Mint. He was responsible for this piece. And that indicates that this was the gentleman responsible, the gentleman in charge. So those are examples of historical privy marks made in France. France was big on them. I'm showing you images while we're talking about this so you get an idea of just how many mints and just how many privy marks were used on these pieces. Some of them really, really cool designs. And it's a way that you don't alter the rest of the coin, right? You're just putting in that one little tiny thing that designates this much information. I've got some examples here of 2020 statehood quarters. These are actually the park quarters, and these all were minted at West Point, and they have a privy mark also. These aren't quite as well known as they probably should be, but a lot of folks who coin roll hunt and a lot of people who collect modern quarters are very much aware of these. I'm fortunate that I get to dig through quarters on a regular basis, and I found all of these and a couple more in change. This is the Tallgrass 2020. And you can see the W for West Point, but also here off to the side, that V25 in an oval. America tends to use this oval technique. I call it a cartouche. V25, that is a representation of the 75th anniversary of the end of World War II. I'll take an example, a look at this example here also. You can see it there. So this is an example of pretty modern circulating U.S. coinage. These pieces were definitely found in circulation, with a privy mark, indicating that this was kind of a celebration of the victory of World War II. And then finally, I've got some examples here of the 2021 Morgan dollar releases. These also caused a bit of a buzz when they were first released several years ago. I think maybe the 2024 flowing hair has caused even more of a buzz. These are pretty exciting pieces. These were released to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 1921 peace dollar, and the last of the Morgan dollars also struck in 1921. But as I mentioned before, the United States had mints that had struck these coins, Morgan dollars originally, that are no longer in existence. The Carson City Mint doesn't exist anymore. The New Orleans Mint doesn't exist anymore. So what do we do about that? I think the Mint came up with a really interesting idea. And instead of using those mint marks, because those mints don't exist anymore, they actually struck them with privy marks that represent the mint that they were supposed to have been struck in. So both of these pieces struck at Philadelphia, but you can see that CC in a cartouche, again, that little oval, that is to represent Carson City. It is a privy mark representing Carson City. And this is an example, if I can get it out, of New Orleans. And this is kind of unusual because it's an O inside of an O, right? So it just looks like the O mint mark on a lot of Morgan dollars, but that's actually the Privy mark. This piece struck at Philadelphia with that O Privy mark representing New Orleans. So yeah, the United States Mint has made Privy marks in the past, going back, if you want to include those arrows, all the way back to the 1850s on circulating coinage going back 4 or 5 years at least now, and then on these mint releases specifically for collectors going back to the 2021 releases of the Morgan and the Peace dollars. Interesting. So we do have a history of Privy marks. Now you know everything you've ever wanted to know about Privy marks. And I think that's going to arm us really well with what we talk about for the rest of this video. So I want to go into a little bit of the history behind the 1794 silver dollar that was the influence for the 2024 silver dollars. We're going to talk a little bit about one of the most famous one of these dollars. We're going to talk about the importance of the 2024 version of this, and I'll use the term dollar in this video sometimes. Technically, these pieces are not monetized. And that's one of the other things that I'll talk about towards the end of this video when I talk about the pros and the cons, and then I wrap this up with a few thoughts about this before we dive into that live stream where I'll open one on camera for everybody. So, the American silver dollar. This is where it all begins, and this is the significance of the 2024, the 1794. Now, this was first authorized by the Continental Congress in 1785, but of course, Continental Congress didn't really have the authority to do that. At that period of time, they set the idea of an American silver dollar at 375.64 grains of pure silver. Where did we get that idea from? We didn't just pull it out of the air. Everything is based on the Spanish colonial 8 reale. Remember, this was what was seen as the global currency of the time. So in a lot of ways, we were mimicking them and even in a certain way, kind of duplicating them. And that will definitely come into play here in just a second. The first dollars, we get the name from a gentleman named Hieronymus Schlick. What a great name. Of Bohemia. This is northwestern Czech Republic, close to the German border. I'll show a map so you can see just how close and important this area was to Germany, to Austria, to Poland. Our modern 20th century, 21st century definitions of these countries is not really accurate. This isn't really what they were, but you can definitely see where it was in relation to this part of kind of Eastern Europe a little bit. This was a large amount of silver. And this count decided to take it upon himself to start striking great big silver coins that he called Jokumsthalers. Why did he call them that? They were found in the valley of St. Joachim. And the suffix tal is like the same thing as dale in English. So over hill, over dale. Tal just means in the valley of St. Joachim. So St. Joachim's taler is where we get the idea of the taler, which eventually became the dollar. So this gentleman, Hieronymus Schlick, was coining these, and then the government kind of realized that he was making a lot of money through seigniorage, and we've talked about seigniorage before in this channel also. So they got in and set up their own mint, and this became a really popular silver coin. It wasn't anywhere near the global monetary, nuclear bomb that the 8 reales came to be. But this is really where the word dollar comes from, and this is where the idea of a large silver coin of very high purity comes from also. So we took that idea and ran with it. That taler became our dollar. And really, the 8 reales were considered a Spanish dollar for a long time. They were thought by many people to be an example of a taler. And that's really what a taler is, just a great big silver coin of really high purity. So we were spinning these in the United States. In the early colonies, this was a popular form of currency. Everybody needed coins, everybody needed currency, and the Spanish 8 reale was considered the gold standard of silver, if you will. And when it came time to start to think about this, the founding fathers of the Continental Congress decided that they were going to base our dollars on the 8 reales, but instead of making it base 8, remember the 8 reale is a piece of 8, they decided that they wanted to take a cue from the Enlightenment going on in Europe and especially places like France, and they would do it on a decimalization scheme instead. So you had a dollar, you had a tenth of a dollar, that was a dime, you had a tenth of a dime, that was a cent. Remember, we don't use the word penny because we're no longer a British colony. But we also had a tenth of a penny called a mill. Did you know that? They were authorized, but they were never actually minted. There are some examples of people who are a little bit of an older age can remember some of these tokens being used to pay taxes. But the best example of a mill, even though it was never produced as a coin, is when you're pumping your gas and you see that price at $3.09 and 9/10 of a cent. Those 9/10 represent mils. So that's 1,000th. That is short for mill, is French and Latin for millésimum, and we've talked about millesimal fineness on this channel a lot. When you see 0.999, that's millesimal. It's parts per thousands, and that's the idea of a mill also. So the Constitution wouldn't be ratified for many more years before the Continental Congress set up what they thought the idea of a silver dollar should be. But when it finally got close to being ratified, we had a gentleman named Alexander Hamilton who was responsible for redefining coinage. And he redefined it in the Coinage Act of 1792. The Spanish 8 reales from 1772 forward were supposed to contain 377.1 grains of pure silver. They were off a little bit. It doesn't seem like the purity was often off, but the weight was definitely off. These coins were prone to circulating to death. And as soon as they started circulating, right, they start losing a little bit of their silver. There were also people who shaved them, and there were also maybe coiners who were responsible for these who might have reduced the weight just a little bit to pad their pockets a little bit. So when Alexander Hamilton was redefining what a silver dollar should be for our new American country, he took a handful of 8 reales like these that he found in circulation, and he weighed them and he assayed them. And when he did that, he found out that the average of these 8 reales, once they'd been in circulation for a little bit, was actually 370.9 grains of pure silver. So we wanted to outdo them a little bit, right? We wanted a little bit of pride in the pieces that we were making. We set them at 371.25 grains. So that's actually a little tiny bit better than an 8 reale. But of course, that meant that those pieces were being shipped overseas immediately by speculators. They knew that they could exchange them essentially for an 8 reale and walk away with a couple grains of free silver. And if you do that 1,000 times over, you start making some money on it. So we actually didn't make these for very long. We stopped making them in 1803. Of course, we have the famous 1804 silver dollars. Remember, those weren't struck until the 1830s or even later. So from 1804 for many years up until 1836, really 1840, if you want to look at the circulation strikes of Go Brexit dollars, we didn't make silver dollars. We just didn't. We didn't have the silver. We didn't have the mines. We didn't have the capacity. And we were making them too big and too rich anyway. So again, we were circulating them. They were getting worn down. And that's why there are so few 1794 and 1795 flowing hair silver dollars in the first place. It's interesting to note that the weight was of major concern, right? The Continental Congress said it first. Hamilton weighed these pieces. Then he said it. The weight of those pieces made them subject to being shipped overseas. We saw the Privy marks for those arrows on those coins from the 1850s. It's all about the weight, right? It's not so much about the currency. At this point in time, people were thinking of this as bullion. They really were in a lot of ways. And even when you were looking at these pieces like this one here, these 8 reales with these chop marks all over it, you know, if you've seen my channel before, what those chop marks represent. Those are steel punches driven into the coin surface by Chinese merchants who are testing the coin's authenticity and its silver content. It's all about the weight. It's all about the silver contained and not so much about the coin. Interesting. In fact, and I'll show a picture of it here, you're looking at the text from the Coinage Act of 1792 where we set those weights and measures for our silver coinage. And you'll see that I believe it's 5 times in the course of this one bill that we call these pieces dollars or units, because this was really a unit of silver. This was a weight of silver. 5 different times that we call them units. I didn't realize that until I was exploring this myself. Always be learning, right? ABL. So what does that mean? It meant that we had a big task in front of us of creating these flowing hair dollars. And, a lot of people see this as a scared chicken. They call this kind of a witch. There are lots of derogatory comments made about this. I actually happen to think that this dollar is beautiful, and I told the story before at a live stream that about 30 years ago I was at a coin shop and an older couple came in, happy, smiling couple, and they were showing my dealer a coin that they had picked up and had just gotten back from, I want to say NGC or maybe PCGS. And it was a 1794 dollar in fine or very fine condition. A beautiful specimen. I had never seen one before. I'd never held one in my hand. And at that time, this piece, when I was a younger man, I was probably in my 20s, this piece cost as much as my first house did. And it was amazing to see that in such a compact form. There are so few of these silver dollars left, and it's mind-boggling to think that some of them are in amazing condition. Long history, important to the history of the American country. They are American treasures in a lot of sense. Now these pieces, that piece would probably sell for $100,000. As I remember, it was a beautiful example in fantastic condition. So these pieces have some serious value to them. And I'm going to talk about one of them in just a second here, because I kind of know a little bit about it. But the important thing to remember about this design is that this was really the first time that coins had been made in centuries, in Europe especially, and we were coming from Europe, right? We are of a European background, that we didn't want our king or a queen on a coin. We don't have kings in this country. And that was intentional. We didn't want them. Now, there are some colonial issues that show pictures of George Washington. A lot of people wanted him to be a king, and he refused that. The idea of having a flowing hair, a woman symbolizing liberty, as opposed to the king of that time, and this is Charles IV, was kind of revolutionary, right? We didn't want a king in this country. We had fought, we had bled, we had died to rid ourselves of a king. We didn't want one. And that's the significance of the design of the flowing hair. And I think it's really easy to overlook that. We didn't have any kind of a world leader on our coins, with the exceptions of commemoratives, until 1932 with the George Washington quarter. So for 150 plus years of our existence, we didn't have a king. We didn't have presidents featured on our coins. Now, we don't even think twice about it, right? All of our circulating coinage have former presidents on them. There's a lot of politics involved there. But for our founding fathers, we didn't want a king. We didn't want to honor somebody like that. They were a public servant, and I think that's worth remembering. That leads me to the fact that a lot of these pieces were essentially handmade. The 1794 and 1795, it was a 2-year series, and we didn't make very many of them, but these pieces were essentially handmade. The dies were all individually hand cut. These pieces were struck by hand. And a lot of times the weights of the planchets, that's the blank coin, was not correct. So we had to file these pieces down literally with an iron file. And in some cases, we actually had to put a chunk of silver into the surface of the coin. That's called a plug. And we'll see an example here. What you're looking at here is, in my opinion, probably the most significantly important coin in American history. Do you know what it is? Anybody? Raise your hand. Pedigree is very important when it gets to rare coins. You see coins that have slabs that say of the John Smith collection or the Mike Barker collection or whatever it might be. But some coins, their pedigree speaks for themselves. This is the Atwater Carter Cardinal Contrusi or Moreland example of this silver dollar. This is a 1794 specimen 66 silver dollar. This piece is amazing, and this is really significant. We don't have a lot of information about it, but we can tell a lot, historically. We don't have paperwork on it. Of course, you're going back over 200 years now. But we do know a lot by looking at this piece. This piece is special. This piece has always been special for as long as we've known about it. And this has been a very coveted piece in American coinage. This is so much, it has been coveted so much that collectors who are fortunate enough to have had this in their collection kind of leave their mark on this coin. Not literally, but in the history of this coin. It has fit into some of the most important coin collections of all time. Like I said, this is known as the Atwater Carter Cardinal Contrusi Moreland example, and now it's gone on to even another collector. Possibly the very first silver dollar ever struck by the United States. And that's just speculation, but I think it's a really good possibility because this piece is phenomenal. When they minted this piece, they really took extra time and they were incredibly careful with it. This piece is actually one of those that has a plug in it. You can just barely make it out there in the silver, at the center of Liberty's face there. There's just a little bit of an extra lump there. That's a plug to adjust the weight. Very carefully adjusted by hand. This is graded by PCGS specimen 66, right? The surfaces of this piece are so exceptional that it's almost a proof. Now, the third-party graders didn't want to call it a proof. We don't have records of proofs going back this far, but clearly this was exceptional. So it's called a specimen instead. That's why you see SP66 there. Note that this also has the green bean from CAC. I love that. It's probably just for publicity, but it's still kind of cool to know that it's got a special proof, a specimen 66 with a green CAC sticker. This was owned by a gentleman that I know. I've had many conversations with in the past. He's a kind of a friend of mine, Bruce Moreland. He bought this piece for $10 million, and I think he got a steal on it. At the time, this was maybe 5 or 6 years ago, people thought he was insane for paying that much for it. He has since sold this, and I understand that Great Collection sold it in 2022 or bought it from him for $12 million. So in just a couple of years, he made, we don't know exactly how much he made on this. He made about $2 million. Great Collections has since sold this to another collector. And I've heard rumors that they paid 13 or 14 million for it. I still think it's a bargain, right? There's one of these. And this piece, by all accounts, should not exist. There is no way that this piece has existed as a 66 since it was struck in 1794. That is amazing. It really should be in a museum. But I think Bruce Moreland put it really well when he said that museums don't seem to do very well with coins, right? They don't know how to handle them. They don't know how to display them. How do you display a relatively small coin about this size that's worth 10 or 15 million dollars so that people can see it? How would they appreciate it? It's a bit of a conundrum. But it really is a national treasure. That's the 1794 Cardinal, or Atwater, or Contrusi, or Moreland, whatever you want to call the pedigree. Anybody who collects American coinage in earnest will immediately recognize that piece. So anyway, that's the history, that's the significance, that's the importance of the 1794, and that really kind of lays the groundwork for what the 2024 is. And I see this as a continuation of re-releases by the American government. People have criticized this for being the 230th anniversary. What does that have to do with anything? Well, you're right? 230 is kind of a weird anniversary. Really, any anniversary, whether it's 100, 200, 250, is kind of arbitrary, right? Every year is a year, so it doesn't really make much of a difference, but I understand the confusion why 230. It has a lot to do with the legislation and the fact that this would have been a difficult piece to produce at other periods of time. The 230 is maybe not quite as significant as most people think it is, but the idea of re-releasing coins that have a classic design is certainly nothing new to the United States Mint, and I'll just take off a couple of them here. The one that comes to mind for most people would be the Silver Eagle, right? The 1986. That's the re-release of the Weinman design for the Walking Liberty half dollar. And I've got an example in solid gold right there. We'll talk about that in a second. At the same period of time, we released the Gold Eagle, right? That is Augustus St. Gaudens's $20 gold piece reissued, right? So you can see that we have a history of doing that, but there's so many more examples that I think people tend to forget. We released the Gold Buffalo in 2016, and that's not just the front of the coin. Remember the Silver Eagle, the Gold Eagle, just the obverse, the front of the coin, but the Gold Buffalo, the front and the back, the obverse and the reverse, and that was 2016. And that goes hand in hand with the series of coins that released about 2014. 2016, we did a solid gold Kennedy half dollar in 2014. I believe that's the 50-year anniversary of the 1964, and I'll show a picture of it here. In 2016, we had 100th anniversaries of some of the most popular coins. It's important to remember that a lot of our early 20th century pieces came about from that Beaux-Arts era of design, of redesigning our coinage. And the Mercury dime, the Walking Liberty half dollar, the Standing Liberty quarter all really came about in 1916. So in 2016, we re-released each one of those. in solid gold. And this is an example of the Walking Liberty half dollar in solid gold. This is a half ounce of pure gold, and it's just a beautiful piece. If you got one of these, the dime, the quarter of the half dollar, these are really interesting pieces, and I think they make a really neat addition to a collection. Again, we have a long history of re-releasing these designs. How about this? This is a little bit lesser known, but check these out. San Francisco Mint. This is the anniversary of the centennial of the San Francisco Mint. So 2006, we released coins that have the gold coin is the classic $5 gold Liberty, and the silver coin that came in this set, of course, is the reverse of the Morgan dollar, right? A lot of people don't know those are out there. If you're a collector of Morgan dollars, or if you like Liberties, same size and weight and purity as the original $5, and it's even got the original back design, the reverse design. Kind of cool, right? How about the 2001 American Buffalo Silver Dollar commemorative? If you are a collector of Buffalo nickels, if you like the gold Buffaloes, check this out. Front and back, obverse and reverse. This is the 2001, so that's going back 23 years now. 2017 and beyond, we did the Palladium coins, the Palladium Eagles. That's an example of the Mercury dime, right on the front, the winged Liberty or Mercury dime. 2009, we released the ultra high relief St. Gaudens re-release. This is a beautiful, stunning piece, and it's not just like the American Gold Eagle, where just the front is the St. Gaudens design. The front and the back on the 2009 is the ultra high release piece, and that is a re-release, a reissue of these classic designs. So that's a dozen different pieces before we even talk about the 2021 Peace dollars and the Morgan dollars. So yeah, we've been doing this for a long time. It's easy to forget about this, and I think that's some of the criticism that the 2024 flowing hair has gotten. Remember that we've been doing this for quite a while now, and all of these examples have been accepted by the coin collecting community. So the argument that maybe these are strange for being produced by the mint, even if it's in 230th anniversary, a lot of these pieces, like the 2001 Buffalo, is something like the 86th anniversary. It's got nothing to do with anything, right? It's just a beautiful design. It doesn't have to commemorate a specific year. We get it in our mind that it needs to be 100th anniversary, 200th anniversary. But really, if you're reproducing a beautiful design, it doesn't need to be anything in particular. So the Mint has had a long history of doing these original designs going back at least 40 years now that I could think of. And if you can think of any other examples, by all means, leave a comment down below. I'd love to have my own memory refreshed. So I told you that I would talk a little bit about the pros and the cons of these 2024 releases. And I do see that there are some negatives, some positives, but I think that there are really some interesting positives to these. Let's start with that. These augment, I think, the 2021, and since then the re-releases also, of the Peace dollar and the Morgan dollar. So we've got kind of a groundwork laid for our classic coins to be reproduced in a higher purity silver, right? These are 999 silver. A lot of people don't realize that. These aren't 90%. These are 999 silver. It's kind of a neat thing. And I think that these the flowing hair does augment these pieces of the 2021 Peace dollar, the 2021 Morgan dollar. The mintage on these pieces, I'm talking about the 2024 flowing hair, 75,000 pieces maximum, right? So that's a very small mintage. And of course, there are some of these that have a Privy mark, and we'll talk about that again in just a second. The 2021 Morgans, 175,000 a piece. I think the 2021 Peace dollar, 200,000 a piece. So the flowing hair is half or even a third as many pieces as those 2021 dollar releases. I think that's definitely a pro. If you bought one of these and you're thinking about returning it, maybe think a little bit harder about that. I didn't think these were especially expensive. It was like $100 with shipping for the pieces that I picked up. So in the scheme of things, a collectible with a 75,000 mintage with the possibility of that special Privy mark, and it's a beautiful design, it's a high premium, but I don't think it's astronomically high. You may disagree with me, and again, you can leave a comment down below, and I'm perfectly willing to accept that argument, but it didn't seem that expensive. And then also, some of these have a Privy mark. Now, the Privy mark we've talked about a little bit before, what its history is and what it means. The Mint released 1794 to correspond with the 1794 date on these. 1794 examples of the flowing hair have a special 230th anniversary Privy mark. Now, the Privy mark is not the entire design, but it's a prominently placed privy on these pieces. And I think it makes these really exceptional. This was an exciting thing for the Mint to do. You can criticize it, you can call it a lottery, you can say that the big buyers got their chances first and they snapped them all up. We don't really know that yet. But when you have an opportunity to buy some of these, and there's only 1794 made, it really is kind of a golden ticket in that candy bar, right? That's what it's going to feel like when I unbox this piece or this piece in the live stream that follows this video. This is exciting, and it's a little bit gimmicky, but it's still kind of cool. Now, I have seen the prices of these, especially certified examples, going up to $10,000, $12,000. That's outrageous. I think that's unrealistic, but there is no doubt that there is definitely some extra value in those pieces that do have the privy. And only time is going to tell how high those prices stay. But for the time being, they are really up there. Is it worth $100, right? Is that a scratch-off ticket for you? It's a kind of a cool thing, I think. How about some negatives? These are not monetized, and that is my biggest negative about these. I really want to call these silver dollars and have them mean silver dollar, but they don't. Congress didn't put an act out that made these pieces legal tender. They, of course, would be non-circulating legal tender. So they are not technically silver dollars. And that technical term means a lot to some people. I would love to have seen these actually be silver dollars. Now, if the Mint doesn't ever release another flowing hair again, it's my belief that eventually they will be considered silver dollars by the collecting community. Remember when I showed that coinage act of 1792? We called them units. It was all about the weight, and these pieces are nice quality 999 silver. So is the definition dollar really necessary? Traditionally, probably not, right? If you were circulating these in 1794, you wouldn't have really cared what the denomination was. It was the purity and the weight of the silver that was important. We proved that with the chop marks and the definitions and everything else, the averages that Hamilton used. So maybe it's splitting hairs. Maybe I'm the only person out there that really feels like that is a missed opportunity. It would have been Herculean for the Mint to have been able to pass legislation to make these dollars. But I would like to have seen it, and I hope they take that into consideration if they make more of these. One of my final thoughts on these. The 230th anniversary is a little bit odd, but consider that the Morgans were the 128th anniversary of the Mint, right? The celebration of the San Francisco Mint. I showed that reverse that looked like a Morgan dollar. 128th anniversary. It was the 88th anniversary of the Buffalo nickel on that 2001 silver dollar, the commemorative, and the 101 anniversary of the Mercury dime for the palladium coin. So the 230 is really not that big of a deal. I think some people put a little bit more into it than it really should be. Who do you really care that it's the 230th? Do you want it to be the 250th? I may not be around by then. And also, I wanted to hit you some final thoughts before we wrap this up. I know we're going up to about 35 minutes now. I do think the price is going to come down on these. I've seen this play before, and I could be wrong, and I'm not suggesting that you sell or buy exactly right now. I think if you want to own one of these, just as your own collectible, wait a little bit. I think within the next year, raw pieces that don't have the Privy mark, we're still going to be probably a 67, 68, 69 on that Sheldon grading scale. I think you'll be able to find them a little bit less expensive than their issue price of $100 or $104, whatever it was. $75, maybe somewhere in there. If that doesn't mean that much to you, go ahead and pick one up now, but I think they're going to come down. I think this will, the next thing will come along. People will start to forget about this just like they always do. That's my prediction. Yeah, check me in a year. If you want one for your collection, PCGS, NGC, or CAC MS70 only. Look for those examples. And I've seen examples right now on eBay in that $350 range for an MS70. CAC at a 69, some people will argue that's the equivalent of a 70. I don't see it that way. NGC, PCGS, or CAC, if you can find one, at a 70 And I wouldn't pay more than maybe $300 for it, and I would try to find one significantly less than that. Again, you might want to wait a little bit longer to see if you can pick them up for that price. If you have the really deep pockets and you want the Privy mark, only a certified example, only MS-70 if you can possibly afford it. And those 70s seem to be in that $5,000 range. I really feel like that's going to come down, but because there were only 1,794 of those, if people get these into the collections and they have what we call deep pockets and strong hands, they may keep those for a long time, right? Because only 1,794 people can be in that club. That's a pretty exclusive club. And for some folks, it's worth it. So I think these prices are going to come down on the Privy marked pieces, especially MS-70 pieces, but I don't expect they're going to come down a ton, right? If they're in that $5,000 or maybe $7,000 range as I'm filming this, I think $1,000 to $2,000 is probably accurate. I think that's probably where they're going to maintain. So I do see them dropping, but I don't see them dropping significantly. A lot of it depends on what the mint does next, and that's kind of an interesting conundrum too. We just don't really know, and I'll talk about that here in a second. With the 1 troy ounce, 24 karat, so the mint is going to release a gold version of this in just a few weeks, right? A 1 troy ounce pure gold, 999 gold edition of this piece. It's going to be significantly smaller, and we've already seen some indications of pre-sales to the big guys. These pieces are going to be expensive, right? This is going to be thousands of dollars, especially with the price of gold where it is right now. So this is going to be an interesting set if you've got the money to afford them. Now, we said that the silver piece, 75,000 mintage, the Privy mark, 1,794, only 17,500 pieces are going to be minted of the gold. But it's expensive. So I think if you want to have a set, this is one that you might want to pre-order or get ready to order from the mint. I wouldn't wait for the secondary market on the gold. That's about a fourth as many made of these gold pieces as the silver pieces, and the answer is no, I will not be buying one of these, and that's my next point. The gold, from the conversations that I've had with people in the field, seems to be being poo-pooed. There are not many people who are anxiously awaiting the gold coin. I think a lot of people are seeing this as hype, and they're not so interested in buying these, which means that the actual mintage, by the time the dust settles, may be significantly less than 17,500. So the gold could wind up being a home run. But again, I'm not touching the gold. It's not something that I'm interested in. I would love to see a trade dollar made, and I'd love to see a bust dollar. I'm not a big fan of bust dollar collecting, but I would love to see it anyway, and I'd like to see the Gobrex Flying Eagle, the Seated Liberty version. So I hope that the mint puts those pieces out also, but if they do, I hope that they monetize them, right? I don't want to see a flowing hair released in the next 5 years that's been monetized. That would kind of suck. But if they are going to release a trade dollar, and we had a conversation in the last live stream, subscribers Michael Mastros and Adam Jam both commented that they'd like to see a trade dollar. I agree. I'd love to see a trade dollar. I'm a huge trade dollar fan. I think that would be really appropriate. I think it would be neat to see. So I hope the mint releases the trade, the Gobrecht, and even the bust. If they do, I hope they monetize them so they are actually silver dollars. I know it's splitting hairs, but it's something important to me. So now you have a history of what the significance is of the 1794, 1795 flowing hair silver dollar, where it fit in the American history, the idea of privy marks, how significant they are. We showed that the mint has been using them going back all the way to the 1850s, if you want to include those arrows, which the mint does. They think of it as a privy mark now. We talked about the privy marks on circulating pieces and also modern commemorative pieces. What are your thoughts about the 2024? Is this something you picked up? If you did, are you glad you have it? I know a lot of people are considering returning it. I don't recommend doing that unless you really need the money. I think these do have legs. I think these are going to be a neat piece to collect for a long time. And we'll be doing an unboxing of this piece as soon as we wrap it up. So definitely look for that link down below. Once this piece goes live, we'll propagate these pieces. We'll tie them together so you can watch the unboxing. Maybe old Dub C got lucky with a privy mark of his own. What do you think the chances are? If you have questions about anything that I talked about here today, by all means, leave a question down below. I'm fond of saying that if you have a question, there's a good chance that somebody else has that same question. Let's see if we can answer it for everybody. If you've got suggestions of other videos you'd like to see me make on precious metals or rare coins, or even video series, leave that comment down below. And if I make a video or video series about that suggestion, I'll give you a big shout out. If you haven't yet subscribed to the channel, go ahead and click on that subscription button. Love to have you be part of this community. Remember to stay tuned for the live stream of this after this video. If you're watching this after its premiere, then definitely look for that link down below so you can see me get egg on my face or maybe hit a home run, maybe. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as we go deeper into the world of coins and physical precious metals.